Before we get into the history of sexism, we should first start by defining the term. Sexism are the prejudices and discriminations against an individual or a group based on their sex and or gender. This is most familiar to us for sexism against women, but we must acknowledge that it also happens to other sexual minorities such as those who are non-binary or non-gender conforming. The term sexism came from the second wave of feminism, which was in the 60s and 80s to the 80s. There are multiple different types of sexism. The two main types are benevolent sexism, which is a chivalrous attitude toward women, which we typically think is good because it is in women's favor, like, oh, let me get the door for you, let me carry this for you, oh, I'll drive, let me do this hard manly work. But really, it's just saying that women are weaker and they need a man to support them and help them. The other big type of sexism is hostile sexism, which is negative attitudes and gender stereotypes, such as like, oh, women belong in the kitchen or women should have children. And it's just a really negative attitude to the people who don't conform to those stereotypes. We also have structural sexism, casual sexism, which is like everyday sexism that we typically don't notice because we, as a society, have internalized it. The United States has a long, drawn-out history of sexism throughout society. For decades and years, women had little to no rights, and it wasn't until the 1920s where the feminism movement really started to pick up pace. It was in the 1920s when women were finally allowed to vote. Fast forward to 1963, the Equal Pay Act was in place, where it stated that regardless of race, sex, religion, etc., that you will get paid the same amount for the same amount of work. However, despite this, even today we still have a pay difference where a white woman makes 78 cents to every white man's dollar. And for women of color, it is even less, where African Americans are at 63 cents to the white man's dollar, and Hispanic women are 54 cents to the white man's dollar. In 1973, abortion became legal, which was a big win for the women's rights movement. However, as we know today, it is still an ongoing battle, especially with today's presidential team. Women's rights, and specifically abortion's rights, are in serious risk. In 1981, the first woman served in the Supreme Court, and it wasn't until 1997 in which Madeleine Albright became the first female Secretary of the State. And not until 10 years after that, 2007, where we had the first female Speaker of the House. In recent years, 2013, the ban against women in military combat position is removed, which overturned the 1994 decision restricting women from combat roles. And most recently, we almost had our first female president, Hillary Clinton. However, the country decided that Donald Trump would be a better fit, despite his controversial views on many social issues.
Santa Clara University was founded in 1851. It was an all-boys institution and remained one for 110 years. In 1861, it became an ROTC school due to the Civil War, and it remained so to this day. In 1961, the university started allowing female students to attend. This is the first Catholic institution in California to do so. STEM majors and other hard sciences are very male-dominated at Santa Clara. Only 24% of the engineering school has female students, and this number is high in comparison to other schools, but still woefully low. This number is accredited by SCU due to the high female staff in the engineering school. 33% of the staff of professors in the engineering school are female. When interviewed, 97% of the campus says that sexism is still prevalent. Examples of this is back in 2013, a frat hosted a Halloween party that included a cage with a stripper pole that had a quote saying "bad bitches only" in it. Many female students got offended by this and asked the frat to take this down, but the frat refused to do so until they got a lot of publicity. The frat president said that this was a reach to say that it was wrong and people were relating this to sex trafficking, and he said that it was only meant to be silly. In 2016, a female student was kicked out of the gym due to showing an inch of her midriff. The staff argued that they were trying to prevent any staph infections from breaking out, along with Santa Clara being a Jesuit institution. The students argued that male muscle tees showed just as much, if not more, skin than the girl's midriff. And if they wanted to prevent any staph infections, all they have to do is work on perfecting cleaning the equipment. These are some examples of sexism on Santa Clara's campus.
Sexism is, I guess, discriminating against someone because of their sex, whether it be like female or male or anything in between, I guess.
Like when you put consideration like someone's sex, like they can't do that because they're a girl, or if you're a guy, you shouldn't be crying or something like that.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's not just like grandparents and everything, but that kind of generation of people are, I would say, the most sexist and the most apparently sexist. And we saw a lot of it in the 2016 presidential election, and now with the way that Hillary was treated versus now how Trump is being treated for similar things or worse things. Yeah.
Like I said, I see it every day. You can see it on different scales. You can see it on larger scales, smaller scales. But I definitely think that it is an issue that should be taken very seriously.
I think so. Definitely within the student body. I haven't really seen anything from staff or teachers or heard about anything that I know of, but definitely within the student body, there's a lot of sexism going on.
I think that our campus does a pretty good job, I think. But then again, when I'm not someone that experiences a problem, it's difficult for me to kind of see it.
Colleges are always kind of a bubble. I definitely feel like SCU can be one of those, in particular with this topic, because definitely what I experienced here so far is not compared to how I experience the world outside of here, because it's just like things I've like experienced, like obvious blatant sexism outside of school, but not here in particular, which like is kind of like a little bit of a safe zone,
The first step towards fighting against sexism is to acknowledge and understand that sexism is an issue. Many people in society, especially the older generations, have the old school traditional ideas about gender stereotypes and gender roles, which is the main contributor to sexism. If we all work to acknowledge that sexism is a real issue and not internalize what society has tried to teach us, then we will be able to understand how the people being oppressed from this issue are being affected and work towards a more equal and just society. The next step would be to provide opportunity and representation for the affected group. This primarily pertains to women and other gender minorities in areas such as careers, where typically higher paying jobs and hard sciences and research careers are highly male dominated, and there's not accurate representation of the minoritized groups like women. And we need to get rid of the gender stereotypes in careers and provide equal opportunity and just representation in these fields, so everybody has the chance to pursue what they want and not be held back by gender roles.
The third and final way to break down sexism is to start the new generation with not following the stereotypes that sexism has, and to start to break down that mentality. Parents typically raise their kids similarly to how they were raised if they saw nothing wrong with the way they were raised. What this means is that if they were raised with sexist ideas, then they will believe that their kids should follow those ideals, such as if daughters are expected to cook and clean and boys are expected to do heavy lifting and play outside, then they will expect that of their kids. However, in schools, you can change that by changing the textbook and course material and making it so that kids can see that both boys and girls can do the same activities. If in a textbook word problem, an elementary school kid read that little Johnny was cooking with his mom and little Susie was doing the housework with his dad, then it could be seen that both genders are able to do the same activities. And in PE classes, it could be seen that if both boys and girl classes were merged together, then they would have the same athletic ability